Thank you for joining us today on Positively Charged Biz. We are here to motivate, inspire, and support our listeners as they write their life stories. We are a proud founding member of the Real Disrupt Podcast Collaborative, and you can check out more awesome podcasts at realdisrupt.com.
Hey everyone, I hope you're having a positive and productive day. On today's show, we are going to learn how to become micro-famous. And I would like to introduce you all to Matt Johnson. He is the marketing agency founder, podcaster, and musician. Matt runs a podcast launch and production agency based in San Diego, California, an international team that helps business coaches, consultants, and thought leaders use done-for-you podcasting to attract an audience, build influence, and become micro-famous. Matt is also the author of the book, Micro-Famous, and currently hosts the Micro-Famous podcast. He's a frequent podcast guest and event speaker to audiences around the US, Canada, and Australia. Matt, on Positively Charged Biz, we like to start at the beginning. So please tell us, when did you discover that the key to influence is becoming micro-famous?
All right. Well, first of all, Laura, thank you so much for having me. We had like our pre-interview conversation was scintillating, so I know we'll have a great time. And just like for your audience, because I get interviewed, like outside the space a lot, but folks in your audience might know me more from like being the co-host of Real Estate Uncensored. I've hosted that since 2015. I also launched Beyond Mortgage and Next Level Loan Officers. So if anybody's familiar with those two podcasts,
Awesome.
that was my
Yes,
company
absolutely.
that handled the strategy and the launch for those. So like I'm super tied into the space. So you may recognize a couple of the podcasts that I'll refer to, because that's really what led to like the whole micro-famous thing. So the short story is this. So I was hosting Real Estate Uncensored, and I was also hosting a show called the Team Building Podcast, which is in a much smaller niche of the real estate space, which was only for real estate team leaders and indie broker owners.
Okay.
Right? And my client, my co-host on that show, had built a 7-figure real estate team, which he's since moved to KW. It was the #1 team of Berkshire Hathaway a couple of years ago. And he essentially runs that 7-figure real estate team in about 2 hours a week.
Wow.
So he started doing, like he said, like, hey, I want to start running events and maybe do some coaching stuff. And I ended up being a partner in his coaching business. And I found that out of the universe of things that we could do, getting him featured on podcasts as a guest and then launching our podcast was the most effective thing we could do to get his story out there and start generating interest in what he was doing. But the real big light bulb for me was the fact that I was running 2 shows in the same industry. One had a big mainstream audience. Real Estate Uncensored is at like 1.5 million downloads, and we consistently hit like all the like top 15, top 20 lists and stuff like that. We get a pretty good traction with a mainstream average, the average agent in the space that that's who that show is built for. Then I had the Team Building Podcast that had a fraction of the downloads. My co-host had very little social media presence. He wasn't active that way. We had a super tiny email list, and that podcast was way easier to monetize. Right? In a couple of years, he'd built like a $500,000 coaching, consulting, live events business off the back mainly of that podcast and getting interviewed. No paid traffic, no big social media presence, very tiny email list. And so that was really the light bulb. And he started to show up at events, and people are asking him for autographs and pictures. And like even today, his podcast gets something like 10,000 downloads a month in a space where the total universe of people who have the problem that he solved is something like 20,000 people. I mean, it's an insanely small, but it's a very small, valuable, affluent niche. And he dominates like the podcasting space in that niche. And of course, it makes it much easier to sell. So I guess the point of that, just to bring it back around, is that was really the light bulb moment for me, was watching the difference between when we first started, him having to sell people, message people, answer questions, get on the phone to get them to come and check out his workshop, for example. To fast forward, let's say 18 months, maybe 24 months of doing that strategy. And he had people going to his website, hearing his podcast or hearing him interviewed, going directly to his website, paying more money, putting it on a credit card, getting on a plane, showing up at his office in Omaha, Nebraska, never even having talked to him or any sales rep or anything, and just showing up and going, great, I'm here for the workshop. He's like, great, I'm meeting you for the first time. And that's the power of influence, right? So it cut out any necessity for sales skills, speaking skills, networking skills. Like it wasn't a skills thing. It was an influence thing. Influence is what made that change happen.
Right. Love
Yeah.
that. And that's a great story. So now let me get very specific in my question in relation to the mortgage industry.
Yes.
Okay. So how do you take that example that you
Mhm.
just provided and apply that to someone in my space?
Yes. Okay. So a couple things. So in the book, we talk about like how to accelerate relationships,
Yep.
and when I'm talking to like coaches and consultants, a lot of times they're kicking off those relationships by getting interviewed on podcasts or maybe inviting people onto theirs or whatever. But the principle is the same. However, you're meeting people, and I used to meet a lot of people through LinkedIn.
Yep.
Just kind of breaking the ice and seeing who I could introduce them to. And just because I was in the podcasting realm, a lot of the ways that I could add value to somebody would be by introducing them to other people I knew in the space that could give
Sure.
them exposure, put them in front of audiences. Well, any mortgage, any person that's in the mortgage industry or in real estate for that matter can do the exact same thing, because there's all kinds of either local shows, YouTube channels, Facebook
Yep.
Live series. Like there's people that are doing things in your home community where you can go out and get featured, get interviewed on those shows, and you can start to use those relationships with the host to add value to people in your strategic network, right? Starting with maybe the key relationships that you have in real estate, financial advisors, CPAs, accountants, bookkeepers, like all those people that you want to build those strategic relationships with that can send you referrals. What better way to build that relationship right now than by introducing them to people who can feature them and put them in front of audiences of their potential clients? And so we things have shifted so much, like we were talking about before we hit record, that just in the last handful of years, the number of podcasts and
Oh, yeah.
Facebook series and YouTube series has exploded. And not just in like the educational space for real estate and mortgage, it's exploded like at the community level too. So people are doing more live shows and podcasts about their community. Go out, introduce yourself, and start getting interviewed on those shows, and that starts to lay the groundwork. It's a much easier way to kind of build that strategic network, and then you can build those relationships and start piggybacking them, off those relationships to meet new people, introduce the people in your network to the other people so you can build relationships there. So that's been really, really successful for me and everyone in my world, is using this new world of podcasting and stuff that we live in, not to just reach new people online, but to use it as a way to build that strategic network of relationships.
And you said a couple of things there. So one, as two points to what you just said. One, you are correct about the number of podcasts, but you also know the flip side is that what's the average number? It's like people don't get past usually like 4 or 5 episodes.
Oh, it's like 8.
People,
yeah, it's like 8 episodes.
Yeah, something like that, right? It's like half of the podcasts out there, people stop at whatever, episode 8. So what's your advice in regards to that, and the consistency factor of how do you get into that momentum? And then the second question, based on what you just said, is, very interesting what you said, and I love the community feel. It's so important for our mortgage professionals to really tie to the community and make yourself micro famous within your local community. It's such a value for both sides. But the piece that I see missing sometimes is going that extra step, like you mentioned about the connecting people and kind of creating that web, because you don't want to look at it almost like having one date, right? Like going out on one date and you're expecting to have a relationship with this person. Well, you can't just have one date and then that's it. You never call them again. You never speak to them. You don't reach out. You don't text them. You just fall off. So it's great that you had a great show and you put it out there and you marketed it, but it's more than that. It's also then going beyond and keeping that momentum and causing that web to tie together and introducing them to other people. So speak about those two things, the consistency of a podcast, and how do you, what could kind of be the process flow to make sure that you're keeping those relationship building in motion?
Okay. So the first thing on the consistency is commit to only what's sustainable. And so I see a lot of people, and this is part of why they burn out on podcasting, is they get super excited about it and they'll launch a show or something like that, and they schedule a metric crap load of interviews in a very short period of time, and then they burn out. right? So I would say commit to doing something once a week if you're going to do something, whether it's a podcast or maybe it's a Facebook Live series or something, right? If you're going to be the host, don't commit to what is unsustainable for you. Do something no more than once a week, maybe even just start out with once a month or a couple of times a month until you get that foundation under you and you know, I know exactly how to do this, I know it's sustainable, and then maybe I'll ramp up. So that would be my first piece of advice is don't gorge yourself and connect with as many people as humanly possible because you will burn out. The second thing on the relationship piece is just like you said, like a dating analogy is perfect because that's what I see happen a lot in kind of this world of like this online world that we're in, which is, for example, you and I might have an amazing conversation, but if we don't stay in contact and I don't make an effort to like introduce you to other podcasts and other experts that I think would be of value to you, we're just going to forget about it. Like we'll have an amazing conversation and we'll remember each other a year from now, but there won't be a consistent relationship. And so my goal with any time that I end a conversation with somebody is I'm going to do this to you, by the way, so hold me to it. But I'm going to ask you.
You're putting it out there, so now.
I know. So at the end of mostly every conversation, especially if I'm talking to somebody for the first time, whether it's a podcast or not, I ask them this question: who can I introduce you to that would make a major impact in your business? Is it a mentor? Is it a strategic partner? Like maybe an ideal client, like whatever it is for you, whoever, like who's the one type of person that if I introduce them to you right now, it would make a major impact. And not everybody can think of someone right away. Sometimes people are so focused on just getting clients that that's all they can think about. And that's fine, whatever. But if you run into somebody that really knows and you can be super valuable by making introduction, even better. But even if they can't think of who that person is, the fact that you've asked the question, I've had people just completely dumbfounded and go, holy cow, I've never had anybody even think to ask me that. That's so thank you so much for asking. And of course, then what's the natural response? Well, who can I keep an eye out for, right? And not that that's the reason that I'm doing it, but it does occasionally generate some really good inbound introductions for me. But the point is that I want to use every time I connect with somebody, if they're a person of influence, I want to find a way to connect them with somebody else who's a person of influence. And I want to be known as that guy. So like if I was going in, like starting off a mortgage career right now, I would want to, as quickly as possible within 18 months, become known as the go-to guy in my circle of influential people in the community that knows everyone. And if you want to meet someone who's influential in my community, I'm the guy you go to get an introduction. That's who I would want to be. And then beyond that, like obviously you want to be micro famous to your email list and your social media audience and stuff like that. But I would start with being micro famous to the most influential people I can find in the community, because then guess what? They're going to put me in front of, people that like audiences that they have access to. Just like you ended up, on your first stage, the same thing happened to me. 18 months into running my podcast in real estate, I reached out to another podcast host. I put my co-host on his show and a couple of other people. I just made some connections and some introductions. Next thing you know, I'm on a plane and I'm speaking at his event to a packed out breakout session across the country. And so stuff like that, it just happens. And if you make yourself available for it, it'll happen more.
And let's go into that. Okay. So let's go into micro famous. Let's, I don't know if you can explain what that term means. And then also the 3 stages of influence.
Yes. So micro famous it's a status where you are famously influential to the right people.
Okay.
So one of the things that I run into a lot, whether it's real estate, mortgage, or even just business consulting, is everybody feels like they need a way bigger audience than they really need to, right? So one of my clients, his database in his city is 100,000 people because he's been running Google pay-per-click ads for 10 years. But guess what? None of those people know him. His real database, if he had to go back into production himself, is probably the same 2,000 people he had 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And those are the people, by the way, that are the most likely to open his email. Those are the ones he's actually micro famous to, right? The other 100,000 people in his email list don't know or care who he is.
Right.
They got to pound the phones, and it's going to take them 150 days and 100 contacts over 150 days to close that deal. Like the numbers are the same. So if you want a really good foundation for a business that lasts, that actually gets easier over time, where you don't have to keep doing the outbound, like pounding the phones and doing hardcore outbound sales. If you want a business that gets easier over time, you want that group of people where they're the exact right people for you. The social circles they run in are full of more potential clients for you. So your referrals actually get you people you want to work with. And you are famously influential to those people. So you are Tom Cruise level famous to that very, very focused group of people. And if you're in mortgage or real estate or any of those like professional services industries, I would challenge everyone to think about your personal Facebook profile, which is capped at 5,000 people. Right. Think about if everyone in that list, if that of your Facebook friends, if all of those people were ideal clients, would you need to be known outside of those people, right, to do 7 figures in sales, right? And I would say for most people that are in professional services, no. Like if you got 5,000 of the right people that know who you are and you are the number one person they think of when they think of mortgage or real estate or consulting or whatever, you don't need anything more than that. And so that's what I mean by being micro famous is you want to be not just known. You don't want your name to be known. That's the lowest hanging fruit of marketing, is to be visible. You want to be known for the right thing. You want to be famously influential so that when you speak, people listen and they take action. And then, well, who do you want to be influential to? You want to be influential to the right people, the ones that are actually potential ideal clients for you. So that's why I say like that's the formula. It's to become like famously influential to exactly the right people.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because, you see it on LinkedIn. People that, I have 30,000 LinkedIn. Okay, like, do you really know those people? Like, really, does it matter that, you went down and just connected to a bunch of people? So my second question to that is, should you pick a specialty? Like, should you be known? I'll just use my company as an example. We are very well known for manufactured homes and renovation and new construction. Should we go all in that if I'm looking for clients, mortgage brokers to come to me, should it be focused on that specialty? Because I would imagine if you're micro famous, you can't be everything to everyone. So I would think the specialty or specializing within your community as far as what you want to project is probably the best way, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in the book, I talk about specialization like it's like the current of a river. And if you get into the river and you flow along with the current, everything comes easier, right? If you specialize and you find like people want specialization anyway. So if you find the specialization that attracts the right people to you and it makes you even easier for them to understand and for them to instantly know that they're the right person for you, it makes everything easier. If you were to get into the river and paddle upstream all the time, which is like trying to be a generalist in a world of specialists, like everything is just harder. It's not that you can't do it. It's not that, what I'm saying, like you might make a living, but nothing comes easy when you're swimming up against the current. And that's what it's like. And you can see it in every field. I mean, doctors are such a visceral example, but what GP out earns a surgeon?
Right.
None of them do. But like real estate and mortgage and a lot of old school industries like ours are full of GPs, general practitioners. I do everything. It's like coming out of the real estate space. It drives me nuts when somebody goes, like I serve, I help people buy and sell homes. And oh, by the way, if you need investment or land or commercial, it's like no. So there was something that I read one time that really hit it home for me, and it was there's a book by David Baker called The Business of Expertise. Mm-hmm. And man, he he hit the nail on the head. He said this: if when you take on a new client, if you have to learn about their industry or a specialty or this area of it, understand that client is paying you to learn on the job. And I'm like, holy cow, like that really hit, because you don't have expertise in that area, right? So if you're getting into, jumbo loans and you've never done jumbo loans before, you're doing FHA, whatever the case is, and you've never done that before, you're taking a chance with your client's time and money because you don't have expertise there. And every time you do that, it pulls you away from specializing in something that could be really good. And I think where people trip up is it's really hard to turn away the person that's in front of you, essentially that represents a paycheck. They have a name, they have a face, and they're offering you a paycheck right now. And you're like, man, it's really hard to turn them away. But what you're not seeing is all those people out there that you could be serving, selling one type of thing, one type of product, or one type of client that you could be serving. There's just thousands and thousands of them out there. They just don't have names and faces yet. You haven't met them yet. But every time you take a paycheck to focus on something that's outside of your specialty, you're delaying reaching those people you could be serving that you could just rack them up, like serve them, you know what I'm saying?
And that's one of those instances where it's great to know other people within your community that are also mortgage brokers, because maybe the guy down the street he might be an expert in jumbo loans or FHA or whatever the example is. And then, hey, I'm the best VA specialist in this area. I help all the veterans, right? Because I'm a veteran and I want to help all the veterans out there.
Yep.
But I know jumbo is not my thing. So I'm going to let Steve down the block handle the jumbos. I'm sure Steve will take your jumbos, and hopefully Steve will give his VA to you because maybe he's not a specialist. So that is a perfect example of where working as a team within your local community, we don't have to be hey, just because we're in the same industry, we're fighting against each other and we can't be on the same team. No, actually we can. And if we partner together, we can help even more families. So that's great.
Exactly.
Go back to the 3 stages of influence because I don't want to skip that one.
Okay. So the 3 stages of influence are get seen, get noticed, get known.
Okay.
So when you get into this world of kind of being visible online, the absolute lowest hanging fruit is just that you're visible. You're just creating content. You're doing something, right? People are starting and they just kind of see you. They don't know what you stand for. They don't really know what you do. They don't know why they should hire you. They just kind of are vaguely aware because they're kind of seeing you around. Ideally, at that point, you want to zero in on what you want to become known for, and you want to develop what I would call a clear and compelling idea. And you mentioned one of them, which is that, hey, I'm the VA specialist in this area, right? That's a clear and compelling idea. You know exactly who you serve, exactly why people should hire you. Great. So figure out what that is. Then you want to start hammering away at that over and over and over again. And all the content you create, and anytime you're interviewed, and anytime you do something online, you're hammering away at that idea. When you do that consistently, you start to build up repetition. People start to notice you. And they don't just go, oh, I know Matt's name. They go, oh, Matt's the VA guy.
Yep.
Right? And then you start to kind of build up that recognition within your community as being the VA guy. You keep doing that, and then you're eventually going to hit what I would call the tipping point of influence, right? So this whole time you've been like pushing a rock up a hill, trying to tell people you're the VA guy. Well, it's going to hit the crest of that hill, and the market is going to agree with you and go, Matt's the VA guy. Exactly. And that's when you start going down the other end of the hill and you start to pick up momentum because other people are spreading it. Other people are telling their friends, oh, Matt's the VA guy. Like Matt helps veterans, right? So it becomes less about you having to shout from the mountaintop and tell everybody what you do. Other people start to spread it for you, and you start to get more interviews to get out there and kind of be featured and spread that. That's when you hit that tipping point where you're known. Right? You're known for what you do. So that's that 3rd stage of influence that we all want to get to. And I'll give you a visceral example. So one of my friends is like one of the top real estate coaches in Australia. And I met one of his top clients. He does something like, it's something outrageous, like 10 or 15 million in GCI off of what essentially is a very small team. It's mostly him and a couple of assistants. He's so micro famous in his space that one of his elderly clients made him power of attorney.
Get
over
out.
her fight. I kid you not.
Oh my goodness.
Power of attorney. She's like 80 years old, selling her house, getting her finances in order, moving into an assisted living, because he's just that he shows he's micro famous in his local space, and he's that well known and that well trusted, and he's got such a genuine personality that as he became more and more well known in his space, he became known for being the person that cares. That's just who he is. That's what he became known for. And so it creates that level of trust that somebody would literally sign over their financial life to their real estate agent. That does not happen.
No.
Just does not happen.
No. So, okay. Everything you're saying makes total sense. Everything you're saying, I'm sure everyone listening to this right now goes, yeah, okay, yeah, I want to be Matt the VA guy, right? That's a perfect example of that's who I want to be. Okay. Why do people get tripped up? Why does it not happen? Because everything you're saying almost seems like, yeah, that's only logical, right? That's exactly what I want to be. I want to connect to my community. I want to build relationships. I want to become micro famous within there where people are kind of referring me out. Mm-hmm. Where do people go wrong? What are the trip ups that cause it so people do not accomplish this?
Well, I think like in your example, there was a moment where it was like a catalyst moment where like I have to do something different because what I've been doing is just not sustainable. It's not working anymore. Something shifted, whatever the case is. And I think a lot of agents figured that out in COVID. When you can't go out there and you can't use your networking skills your local speaking skills. You can't hit up your chamber of commerce. You can't take people out for coffee. You can't do all the normal things you used to do. I think that was a catalyst for a lot of people. And sometimes we just need that. Because you can see the vision of what, like I want to be micro famous in my space and in my local area. But if the stuff that you're doing is getting you by,
right,
it's going to be really hard to change. So the fact that some people haven't hit that catalyst moment, or it took something like COVID to get them thinking in a new direction, that's just human nature. But once you've made that decision and you go, okay, I've hit that point where I've got to make a change. And this is the strategy that I want to pursue. I want to be known in my area for being, like having a specialty and serving one particular type of client. Once you've made that decision, the thing that trips people up most often is deciding what they want to be known for and who kind of their right people are, because then it gets wrapped up in your identity, right? Like, what do I want to be known for? Like, I don't know. Do I want to be the VA guy? Do I want to be the FHA guy? Do I want to be the jumbo loan guy? Right? Then it starts to hit at your identity, because you start to realize, oh, if I'm going to be known for something, and if I'm going to serve one type of client, it better be the right something and the right client, right? So, because before you're just kind of, like you're doing whatever comes and you just take it all.
Anything that comes this way, right?
But once you decide, I'm going to start turning down people that don't fit my ideal profile, that's when it gets scary. And I think the thing to realize, one of the things that I learned from one of my mentors that I thought was so good, and I was wildly jealous of him for even knowing how to do this, was he would visualize leads coming into the business.
Okay.
And he would think about it and he'd go, okay, well, if I don't have as many leads as I want, it's not that I need to generate them and get them. It's like they're already flowing. They're just not coming into me as fast as I want. So where's the bottleneck?
Okay.
So he would think about it in terms of there's like leads are unlimited. There's all kinds of people out there that need mortgage services. They all need loans. They all need refis. Great. If they're not coming to you, if you're not getting the right people, think about what the bottleneck is. Right? And if you think about it that way, it kind of gets you out of that scarcity mentality. And that scarcity mentality is what holds people back a lot of times. That's what keeps them taking the clients that aren't right, the ones that take up all their time, the ones that are never happy, the ones that don't leave you testimonials and referrals, the one, like all those people. And we consistently take those clients on because we can't see the vision of all those other people that would love to work with us if we told them exactly who we are and why they should hire us. So we end up taking the checks from the people that are just kind of in our world and doing a lot of different type of stuff because we can't catch the vision of saying no to them for now so that I can say yes to all these other people over here that I haven't met yet. So you got to like visualize all those people and think about what would it be like to be Matt, the VA guy? Right. If I only worked with veterans that I'm really passionate about because I was a veteran and I was in Iraq and Afghanistan and I want to help those people get their first and second homes. Think about all the people that are out there that need you. You don't know who they are yet. They don't have names and faces yet, right? But visualize them in your mind and think about them flowing into you because they know you are the right person for them and they resonate with your message and they saw you on Facebook or they saw you on LinkedIn. Like, I think that's the key there is to really visualize them coming in and going, yes, those are my right people. And if I was influential to them, I wouldn't even need to take all these other types of clients on anymore.
So would you say that's your first step? Finding out who you are? Is that the first step?
That's a big one.
Because I think that's where I want to leave everyone off with, and then we're going to tell them how to find you and connect.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you one question that would help. One question that helped me a lot. So at one point I asked myself, if one of my clients dropped into San Diego and texted me out of the blue and said, "Hey Matt, let's go grab a drink or I'll buy you a cup of coffee," who would I be excited to say yes to? That cleared up everything right there.
Right.
Right. Then it was a matter of once I figured out who the right people were, then I was able to work backwards from there and go, okay, well, what message would really compel them that would be interesting and surprising and arresting and different and polarizing, Yep. But it all started with the right people. So I made it less about myself and more about who would I want to surround myself with.
Yeah, it's like when you get that text message and it's like, who are you excited to get it from and who are like, oh. So right. So who is it that you're like, oh, they're coming to San Diego. I want to see them. So I like that because you're right. I think we struggle, and we do all say, my goodness, I can't give this up because if I give this up, maybe I'm making the wrong decision. And it is an identity crisis. Yeah. So I love that example. Who would you be excited to sit down and have dinner with or get that out of the blue text message that makes you happy to speak to them and connect with them? So I think that's great advice. I think that's a perfect first step for them. Okay, now next step, tell them how they can get your book, learn more about you, all of that.
Well, if you are a physical copy guy like I am, Amazon obviously the best place to go. And if you want to just get a free digital copy, you can go to getmicrofamous.com. If you're more of an audio person there, you've got links to my podcast and stuff like that, so you can listen to the strategies there in audio form if you prefer. That's the best next step.
Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful, Matt. You certainly have given us a lot to think about, and we all look forward to being micro-famous. Thank you so much. We wish you well.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Positively Charged Biz. I'm Laura Brandeo, and we are here to motivate, inspire, and support our listeners as they write their life stories. If you have an inspiring story, please email me at laura@positivelycharged.biz. And remember to subscribe to hear more great guests. And connect to us on Facebook at Positively Charged and Instagram at Positively Charged Podcast. Until next time, we wish you a positive day.